All right, guys, welcome to our Bible Basics class. Let me just see if anybody remembers something from last week, okay? How many books of the Bible are there?
66.
Yay, very good. All right.
Prizes.
We need prizes. I didn't have candy. Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah. And what are the first 5 books of the Bible? What kind of book? What's the genre? The genre. What kind of books are they? Not history. The law. Susan's good. The Torah or the Pentateuch, right? Those are all words for that. Cool. Good job, guys. All right. Well, see, now y'all are going to see my notes. That just is not good. All right. Well, tonight we're going to move into our discussion about Genesis. And so we're trying different things and see what works and what doesn't with our format. But I thought we would start with, what does Genesis mean? Okay. So what's the name of the book mean? Does anybody know? It's not a hard one. What do you think? What's Genesis mean? Beginnings. Y'all are so in sync. Wasn't that cute? Anybody else have a different answer? No? It does mean beginnings, right? So yeah, that's awesome. Or it could mean origin, okay? And so that gives us some insight into what the book of Genesis is about, right? Last time I used your computer for the recording, and that's why it was showing up better. Okay. All right, so now where is Genesis found? This is an easy.
In the beginning.
The beginning, that's right. In the beginning. It's not page 1 though. So you remember last week we talked about how most Bibles have all this other stuff in front of it. So yours might have a table of contents and then an introduction or drawings about how this version was written. But the first actual book, so here's my page, says the Old Testament. So Genesis is the first book of the Old Testament. Everybody see that? And there we get to the beginning of Genesis. All right, very good. Oh. Okay, let's talk about the timeline of Genesis. When does it begin? At the beginning. Thank you, Bryce. So if you were to draw the timeline of Genesis, you would have a really long line, right? That would start at the beginning of time, at creation, and it would go all the way over here. Let's see what year that is. So the years count backwards, right? Because this is before Christ, and so we're counting them backwards. And I think this was 1860 BC. And that puts creation at about the year 4000 BC. Not like carbon dating 40,000 million years like they come up with that nobody knows about. But do you know how they get the timeline to say that it was 4,000 years before Christ? Does anybody know that?
The genealogy?
Yes, they follow the genealogy. So in the books, in Genesis, it'll say that so-and-so lived 600 years and his son lived 500 years. And so it's through the adding up of all of that we come up with an estimate of Genesis that goes from 1840 or 60 all the way back to 4000 BC. I think that's not the right number. 1805. I'm sorry, 1805. That's what happens when I try to remember. Okay. All right.
So what was 1805?
Elizabeth Ann, are you logging in again? Yeah, she must have frozen on us. So 1805 BC, that's the end of Genesis.
Oh, okay.
So this is the beginning of Genesis, and that's the end of Genesis. So it covers a lot of years, right? And so if we were to talk about who wrote the book of Genesis, Who gets credit for writing Genesis? Moses, right? So Moses gets credit for writing Genesis, but the first part of Genesis, really all of this happened before Moses was born, right? So how would Moses know what happened then? Y'all can unmute and answer if you'd like. How would Moses?
God told it.
What is it?
He heard it from God.
Yeah, he heard it from God. And there's another way too that the Israelites would have known a lot of this story would have been by oral tradition, is what they call it. So
Just about to say that.
yeah, so it was passed down from generation to generation to generation, and which we still do today, don't we? Hopefully, we still tell our kids the story of creation before they can even read about it for themselves, right? You guys probably heard it in Sunday school. Anybody? Yeah? Okay. So that's how it was passed down, and that's how it became a book of the Bible. All right. All right. Now, one of the things I wanted to explain too is I've been using the book that Dan and I studied all those years ago, 30 Days to Understanding the Bible. Remember that one? And it talks about different eras of the Bible. And we do that in discipleship training too, except there's a few more eras in the 30 Days book than you might see in other sources. And it actually divides the whole Bible into 12 separate eras. So each week as we're looking at whatever chapter or book we're studying, we're going to talk about what era that came from. And Genesis actually covers, it's in 2 of the eras, because the first era is called the era of creation, right? And each era has a central figure. So who would be the central figure? Not God, but what human would be the central figure of creation? No? Adam. Very good. Yep. So this is Adam. The next era is called the Patriarchs, right? Do you remember that from discipleship training?
Mhm.
That's where they started. Okay. Somebody online tell me what patriarch means. Do, 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 do.
It's like a family, or well, the patriarch is the male head of family,
Yes. Okay.
or the male ruler of a time.
Okay. So yeah. So a patriarch is like the male head of the family. Very good, Elizabeth Ann. Who's the main patriarch that we associate in Genesis? Abraham. Bryce is rocking it. Okay. Abraham. Okay. So those are the first 2 eras out of 12. And we may be here for a little while, right? But Abraham takes a central role in that. So, all right. So we all have to speak on what Genesis is. Yeah. All right. Anybody know how many chapters are in Genesis? Don't look. How many chapters?
It's 50 something, because I read the last chapters.
Yeah. Very good.
50 or 51?
I think it's 50.
Okay.
Let me see. I'm at the end. We'll double check your work. Yes, there are 50 chapters. But Genesis is not the longest book of the Bible. Anybody know what the longest book of the Bible is? Psalms has the most books, the most chapters.
Right.
Yeah. Which one has the most words? No, you're very close though.
Jeremiah.
Jeremiah. Woo! Susan's a Bible nerd, y'all. Yeah, so Jeremiah has the most words. Psalms has the most chapters, but so Genesis is the second longest when it comes to how many words in the Bible. So there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on in the book of Genesis. So we're going to divide it into sections and kind of do an overview of here's what happened in this part, okay? And but before we get to, I know I assigned some of that to you guys, but before we get to that, we're going to play a game. Oh, I love this thing. So we're going to play a game. because I'm going to show you some pictures, and they may not be able to see it online, guys. That means y'all have to step up, all right? And then you're going to tell me where to put it, okay? So I have 12 pictures, and we actually had some kids that helped us with some of our drawings. Others of them just came off the line, so they're not great. But I want you guys to help me. We're going to see if we can put them in order, and then when everybody goes over your section, we'll be able to tell whether they're in order or not, okay? So consider that this is the timeline from 4000 BC to 1805 BC. Our first picture is of Cain and Abel bringing their offering to God.
That's the first.
Yeah? Yeah? Think it should go towards the first?
Under Adam.
Yeah? All right. So yeah, it would be part of Adam's story, wouldn't it? Okay. There you go. All right. The next picture. Here it goes, guys. Do you see this one? People build a tower at Babel. Everybody see that one?
That's towards the middle.
Towards the middle / end, Bryce says. Somebody stop me.
That's chapter 11.
Before Abraham. Okay.
Yes, before Abraham.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to have room for all of our pictures up here. What do you think? Yeah. All right. Y'all can unmute if you want to help us, okay? Next we have Jacob trades soup for Esau's birthright. Can you see it?
Yeah.
I do
Right
it for
next to
Abraham.
the
Yeah.
tower, about right after Abraham.
After the calling of Abraham.
Okay. So we'll put it there. All right. Will you look in there and see if you can find my power cord, please? Next, we have a drawing sent to us by Galen. Thank you. This, you know, what it is? The story of creation, right? So where would that one go?
Number 1.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to put that one at the very beginning. No, if we weren't socially distanced, we were going to have a contest to see which group did in groups. Let's see who can in the order fastest. All right. Okay.
Some questions coming from Audrey.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Oh, this is a good one. Next, gets married twice. That's a little harder. After what?
After the last one on the board.
After Jacob trades soup for birthright. Then he got married.
Well, not quite.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now we have the Israelites move to Egypt.
That's towards the end.
Anybody know?
That's near the end,
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I think.
That's almost the end of Genesis.
All right. Oh, this one's a hard one. Abraham prepares to offer Isaac. You know, I'm trying to do this class kid friendly. And so some of the pictures were like, oh no. So this one, Isaac's just carrying wood. I started to call it Isaac and Abraham go for a walk. You know? Can y'all hear me okay? It says that my speaker's not working, but I think it is.
You cut in and out some, but I wasn't sure if that was my Wi-Fi or your speaker.
Okay.
I can kind of figure out what's going on.
Okay.
The
my-
picture-
oh, I can't hear.
Okay.
All right. So this is Abraham and Isaac. Where should it go?
After the Tower of Babel.
After the tower. Okay. This one is brought to us by Cheswin. You see? Can anybody tell what story that is?
That's what's sold in slavery.
Yeah. What would you really call it though? There you go. Joseph and his coat of many colors. Good job, Cheswin. Where would that one go?
Before they moved to Egypt.
Before they moved to
And
Egypt.
after Jacob got married twice. Was he
Dolly Parton album.
reasons they moved to Egypt.
I'm sorry, Tim, say that again.
On a Dolly Parton album.
Yeah. Okay. Bryce says here, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Adam and Eve have to leave the garden. You see this one?
Before Cain and Abel.
After creation.
Yeah, do y'all agree? But before Cain and Abel?
Yeah.
Okay. After creation, but before Cain and Abel. Is that good? Can y'all see that better? Okay. That one a little closer. God tells Abraham to go. Do you like the drawing on that one? There's like a big hand coming up. Go.
Before he goes on a walk.
Before.
After Cain and Abel, before the tower.
No, it goes after the
Oh,
power.
yeah, after the Tower of Babel.
After the.
That's when he left the study state of Ur, Mesopotamia, to go to Canaan.
But also, like, we have the Tower of Babel and then Abraham doing a thing. So it's like,
So here.
Yeah.
Okay. So this was before he had Isaac, right? All right. All right, we got two more. This one is brought to us courtesy of James and his grandma. See, it's a little inside the lines, right?
Which part did James color?
Yeah. He did help scribble a rainbow. So. All right, Noah's Ark, where does that go?
Before the tower and after Cain and Abel.
Yeah, okay, Dola's got it, yeah.
Well, she was a Sunday school teacher forever.
Before the tower.
I taught these lessons maybe a couple of times.
Yeah.
All right, and this is our last one. Lot's wife is turned into salt.
Before Jacob and Esau, but after Abraham and Isaac.
Okay. Did y'all hear Susan? Is she right? Yeah, okay. All right. That gives us a pretty good timeline of Genesis, doesn't it? I tried to just pick random stories and not get too bogged down because there's a whole lot of stories in between all of those. But have you guys heard most of those stories before? Yeah, give me a yes or a thumbs up if you've heard most of those, if not all of them. Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty familiar, aren't they? Why do you think these stories are so familiar to us?
Dola.
Yeah, some of us had to learn them later in life, right?
Well, yeah, I didn't pay no attention to it when I was young.
Yeah, but these are the basic Sunday school lessons, aren't they? It wouldn't be hard to find a children's curriculum that covered all these stories. And so a lot of times when people think of the Bible, these are the stories they think about because they're the most well-known, right? Not all of them are equally well-known, like Lot's wife turning into salt, right? But a lot of people have heard of that before, even if they don't know where it is. Yeah. So here's what we're going to do now. Last week, I gave you sections of Genesis because what we're going to do is break the chapter or the book down into portions. And I've asked each of you how many of I think there were six. There were 6 of you who are going to report back on what was in your section. And so when you're talking about your section, you can tell us which of these pictures took place in your section. that right? Is that cool? All right. So who was assigned Genesis 1:1 through 2:3? Was that you, Bryce? All right. All right. So Bryce, what can you tell us about the section that you read?
I read, I forgot to read 1:1. I read 1:3 on accident, but I didn't read 2:3. 2:3 is when God made the seventh day holy and rested.
Yeah. Okay. So your assignment was that whole first section, 1:1 to 2:3. So how would you summarize that whole section? Yeah, that's all right. You know what happened. Tell us what happened in that section.
The creation.
Yes, that is the creation story, and it ends with God resting, right? So how many days did it take?
7.
7
Well,
days,
6 days to do everything.
and then he rested.
One rest of that.
Okay. How did your section start? What was the first verse? In the
He
beginning.
created light.
Yeah,
And separated from darkness.
yeah. Let's see.
In the beginning, God.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's okay. You got the story down, right? Yeah. I didn't ask you to memorize the scripture. All right. Could y'all hear Bryce? Or at least you could hear me repeating Bryce. Okay. All right. So what pictures applied in yours? Just the first picture? Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. And then the next section was chapter 2, verse 4 through 5:32. Who had that one?
I had that one.
All right. Tell us
I
what.
know. So basically in chapter 2, 4, and 5, it's the second creation story where Adam and Eve had not yet been formed. And so God had everything in place except for he didn't have the plants yet because the rain hadn't come and he didn't have anybody to work the land. So now it was time for him to create a man in his own image. So that was it's the beginning of the second creation.
Okay. And the main character there was Adam then, right?
To be there, the main character in verse 4 and 5, Adam's not yet.
Oh, okay.
It's a forethought.
If you go all the way,
because it says that God had what?
Did you read all the way through chapter 5? Or did you just do the first 3 verses of 2?
I don't know. You said chapter 2, 4, and 5.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. The second section is actually chapter 2, verse 4 through 5, verse 32.
Oh.
Yeah. It's a section.
Oh.
All right. So, but let's look at it.
That was funny. Okay. So I read chapter 2, verse 4 and 5,
Yeah.
and then chapter 32.
Okay. Okay. So next time I should put them in writing, right? That would have been helpful. Yeah. All right. Let's flip really quick. Okay. So Genesis chapter 2 then is the creation of Adam and Eve, like you were saying. So when it started,
yes,
man wasn't there, and then Adam and Eve were created. And then chapter 3 is when they're walking in the garden. And what happens when they're in the garden? Yes. So they end up they disobeyed God, right? By eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? And then what happened? They got kicked out, right? Yes. Okay. So yeah, that's the second picture where they had to leave, right? And so they lost paradise. And you remember that in that time they were walking in the garden with God, and so they lost closeness with God, and that was the consequence of sin, right? And then if you look at chapter 4, it comes the story of their children. Who were their first 2 children? Cain and Abel. Yep. And Cain and Abel were good, upstanding people, right? Yeah, he tried or he did? Yeah, he did. And in our picture, I don't know if y'all remember this, I was trying to be a little more positive. So this is the picture of them bringing their offerings, and whose offering was acceptable to God? Abel's. And so Cain got a little jealous, didn't he? Yeah. Anybody ever heard of sibling rivalry? This is when it started. Yeah, Dola's like, no. Yeah. So, yeah. So Cain ended up killing Abel. And so, all right. So that was all in chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? All right. Then we go to chapters 6 through 11. Is that you, Dola?
That was me.
All right. Can you summarize yours for us?
It rained for 40 days and 40 nights. And Noah was stuck on the boat with his family. And all these animals. Then the boat came to rest on a mountain. And eventually Noah and his family got to come out of the boat. God gave them a rainbow to show that he would never flood the earth like that again. All the other people died. And Noah's family had to repopulate the earth.
Okay. So they got busy, right?
They got busy and they started building the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
And at that point, they could all speak the same language and all understood each other. And God said, if they can do this, understanding and being able to talk to each other, and they can do this, so let's have them all speak different languages.
All right. And that actually symbolizes the beginning of nations, doesn't it? Because they had different languages and they went their separate ways, right? So why did God send rain for 40 days and 40 nights?
To kill off all the other people because they had become so evil.
Yeah. So did that start? I mean, it kind of started with Cain and Abel, didn't it? And then you see mankind kind of declining. And then, and so it gets so bad that God decides that Noah and his family are the only ones worth saving, right? And so, good. That was a very good summary. Yeah. And what was wrong with building a tower?
They tried to make it reach heaven.
They tried to reach heaven. Yeah. So that was like a lack of reliance on God, wasn't it? It was like, we can do it ourselves. We don't need God to get to heaven. We'll just build a tower ourselves, right? And that wasn't cool with God, was it?
I was thinking they wanted to climb the tower so they could get to God.
Yeah. Yeah.
They wanted to go to heaven.
It didn't work though, did it? No? Yeah. All right. Any other observations about that?
They actually believe that they found Noah's Ark on a mountain in Turkey.
Yes, on Mount Ararat, right? Yeah. But Turkey does not like people going there. No. All right. Okay. Who had chapters 12 through 25?
I did.
Susan?
And I had a lot to say. That was a lot of chapters. But I was told to condense it. So here's the condensed version. This section is about Abraham and his adventures. Originally, his name was Abram, and he married a lady named Sarai. They were from Ur. They landed in a place called Haran, and they lived there for a long time until God told Abram at that time, to go to a different land, which was Canaan. Abram did not ask any questions. He picked up his belongings, took off with his nephew Lot, and they went. A lot happened along the way, which we won't go into. And the names were changed to Abraham and Sarah along the way. And let's see, Abraham had dreams. He built altars along the way. And by the time Sarah was 90 and Abraham was 100, they had a son named Isaac. But actually before Isaac was born is when Lot and his family were told to get out of town because Sodom and Gomorrah was fixing to get rained on with fire and brimstone. Right. Because it was a horrible, horrible place. And so Lot and his family were told they could leave, but Lot's wife looked back, so she was turned to a pillar of salt. That was a cool story. But also, the other thing that happened was when Sarah was 127, she passed away. Abraham bought a cave of Machpelah, which is where he and she were both buried. But believe it or not, at this point, Sarah was 127, so that made Abraham 137. He got married again, had 6 more sons before he died. He was 175 years old when he died and was buried in the same cave as his wife.
Wow. So is that the end of the reading?
That's the end of 25:18.
Yeah. Okay. That was a very good summary. So, well, can we stop? Can we talk about a couple of the on the ways?
Okay.
Okay. Because on the way, so God told him to go, and he didn't know why. So you covered that really well. Did he ever get to Canaan?
Yes.
Yes.
He did.
So he actually did get to the promised land,
He
right?
did get to Canaan. Yes,
Yeah.
he did.
And God also promised him something along the way. Do you remember what were God's promises to Abraham?
Yes, God promised him he would be the father of many nations through his own wife. And they kind of did a few things, but eventually Sarah did have Isaac.
Yes. So before Sarah had Isaac, Abraham actually fathered another child named Ishmael,
Yes,
right?
that was in here.
And that was a mistake,
Yes.
right? Because they didn't trust God's timing.
Exactly.
Because they were already really old when God said you're going to have a child,
Yes.
right? And do you remember Sarah's response when the angel said you're going to, yeah. Yeah. And actually the word Isaac means laughter, right?
Mhm.
So she kind of stuck with that whole theme there, that it was a funny story. So I think that's one of the important things about that section too, is that God made a promise to Abraham, because what we're going to see after this is the working out of that promise through the next good era, right? You're going to see how God is fulfilling the promise that he made to Abraham to be the father of nations. And what else did he promise? Can anybody else remember a promise God made to Abraham?
That was the main promise as far as I read. Mm-hmm.
How about that? That he would bless the nations. God promised that he would bless the nations through Abraham.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
So yeah. So those were big deals. Any other questions or observations about that section of Genesis? Very good. I know that was painful for you to trim it down.
I could have said all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay. So we have Abraham, and he gives birth to Isaac. That's the only, and Ishmael, but Ishmael went away, right? So Abraham and Isaac that's who's at the end really featured in that portion, right?
Right. Well, Isaac did get married just right there toward the end. Abraham's servant went away to their homeland to get a wife for Isaac, so that they wouldn't intermarry with whoever, in Canaan where they were living. They wanted heir from their family.
So they sent. So he sent a servant all the way back to where Abraham was from.
Yes.
To get a wife for Isaac.
And her name's Rebecca.
Yes. And if I remember correctly, like he brought her back into his mom's tent because his mom had passed away, right? So it was all in that right at the end there.
Yes, right at the end.
Cool. All right. Okay. Who has chapters 23 or 25:19, I'm sorry, through 28:9?
Well, that would be me. Correct. And I actually wasn't very prepared. Very prepared, but I've read the story many times.
Okay.
I'll kind of do the best I can. This is the story of, it's about Abraham. Abraham is dying, and his Isaac's sons, Jacob and Esau, and the problems they had. It's kind of a sad story about. To me, it's a sad story because of what Jacob, did to Esau. It's kind of a terrible thing.
What did he do?
Well, he stole his birthright first. He did that. He kind of tricked him. when Esau was coming in from the field, he was real hungry just for some forage or some food. He ended up selling his birthright, which was a mistake on Esau's part.
I love
So
this.
that-
I love the picture here. 'Cause, you know, 'cause
Yeah.
he looks very sneaky, doesn't he? Like,
Yeah, why would you do that? But
Yeah.
anyway.
It's all that's Esau our king, because that dude kills people.
yeah.
Well, then that's the story where the Jacob was trying to fool his father into thinking it was Esau and put a pelt on his arm.
That's
Yeah.
later. That's funny.
That's
That's
how
That's
furry
later.
his brothers
Yeah.
are.
That's a little later, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
when he steals his blessing.
Yeah. There
That's
you
when he
go.
started his birthright there.
Yeah.
And then chapter 26 was about there was a famine in the land, and Isaac ended up moving towards because of the famine. He ended up going to the land of the Philistines to live there for a while. The leader of the Philistines was Abimelech, and one of the things Isaac did, he told his wife Rebecca to say that you're my sister, because he was afraid they would kill him to take Rebecca. That was another kind of a strange thing, I thought.
Had we ever seen that before?
Yes, we have.
That was along the way,
Along
wasn't
the way,
it?
yes.
So his dad had done the same
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah,
right?
done it twice,
Yes.
actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, anyway, so he stayed. Of course, when Abimelech found out that it was his wife and not his sister, he was real upset. Anyway, in the land, Isaac prospered, did real well. A lot of the people were real jealous of him, and they did things like fill in the wells of his the property, which had been he had been blessed with, and so he ended up moving away. And anyway, he I can't remember exactly what happened then. But anyway, we move on to the time when Jacob gets Isaac's blessing. Jacob was kind of the favorite of his mother, Rebecca. Esau I think he had married a Canaanite woman or something, so that was kind of a bad thing, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, Jacob was the favorite of his mother, and so she helps him to get his blessing by he dresses up in some animal skins, and I think everybody knows the story where his father, Isaac, was dying and getting really old, and his senses aren't very good, so he rubs the hair and he thinks it's Esau, so he gives his blessing to him. And then, of course, Esau's furious now. He's not only has he sold him his birthright, but now he has the blessing from his father, so he's going to kill Jacob. So Jacob ends up, his mother advises him to run to another land until his brother cools off.
Yeah.
Oh,
Which-
Jacob, wrong.
All right, that's probably where your section ends
Yeah, that's
then, right? Jacob earned a nickname. So do you know what Jacob was known as? He's known as a cheater or the trickster. Yeah, yeah. So, but actually what we're starting to see too are some family traits, right? So, so the whole like Isaac and Abraham both telling their wives to pretend like they're sisters, and then we're going to see that for Jacob anyway, what goes around comes around, right? So who has the next section, verses chapter 28, verse 10 through 36:43?
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
So my section starts with summary. It's really the expansion of the tribes, and then I guess the seeding of the nations, the community of nations that are formed from back to Abraham. So beginning of it, Jacob's on the run, and he ends up finding his uncle and marrying his niece. His uncle then it's a great soap opera.
Yeah.
The uncle pulls a fast one
Mhm.
when Jacob's too drunk, and he marries the ugly daughter, After having spent
We prefer homely,
Old.
okay? Or old.
after having spent 7
He
years.
had kind eyes. That's the translation.
That's right. We've talked about this in the ladies' class before.
Okay. So then he cuts a new deal with Uncle for another 7 years labor to try to get the original daughter he wanted to marry. And he does that. And then he ends up working for them for like 20 years. But after he gets the 2 wives and they start having children, God's not following the plan that they think he should. So they come up with the idea of the maidservants starting to father the children. And so there's 4 wives and a dozen children that come out of this. And then after the first 14 years, Jacob continues on and starts building his own empire. He's kind of cheating the uncle's kind of cheating him. And at the end of the 20 years, Jacob pretty much has everything. And now he leaves town. He goes to another area. Someone tries to marry his daughter. He then tricks an entire city into being circumcised and then laughing at them.
All right. Cool.
And so the land.
But that's the story of him going home, right?
Well, not yet. That's
Yeah.
on the way.
Okay.
And then the last part of before going home, he runs into Esau on the road, and he's really worried about exactly how Esau's going to react. So he treats him like royalty and gives him all kinds of gifts. And Esau's like, I'm over it.
What happened to Esau? Does anybody know? Do you know who his people are?
Yeah,
Mhm.
but I can't remember the name of the name.
The Edomites? Does that sound right? Yeah.
That's right.
All right. Yeah. So Esau had his own family and his own thing going at that
Well,
point,
he
right?
had 400 soldiers on
Yeah.
the road when he met Jacob.
Okay. So that's the story of Jacob going home,
Yeah.
right?
So then when Jacob gets home, he has his last child. Actually, the 12th child finally born.
Yes.
And then they establishes the 12 tribes.
And what happens when that 12th child was born? Isn't that when Rachel passed away? Yeah. So Rachel was the one he truly loved,
Yeah.
right? And then,
In childbirth, yeah.
okay. And she died giving birth to Benjamin. Yeah. Okay. So, but Jacob has 12 sons. Very good. Very good. All right. Who has the last section?
I do.
All right.
So a lot happens, and I wrote like on little tiny note cards to try to not talk the whole time.
You and Susan. Here.
Note card 1. Joseph, who is Jacob's son, is sold by his brothers and taken to Egypt. And then we get the story of Tamar. Yeah, I won't go into that one. Joseph works for Potiphar, but his wife has him put in prison. And so while he's in prison, he interprets dreams of the guy that brings the king wine and the guy that brings the king bread. And through God, he predicts correctly what's going to happen to them. And so like 2 years later, the wine guy tells the king this, and Joseph correctly interprets the king's dreams, and then he becomes governor over Egypt. And then there's a famine, and all his brothers come. He won't give them food. A lot of stuff. There's some. What did Susan say?
A lot of stuff along the way.
Some things happen along the way. There's some trickery by Joseph. He pulls a couple fast ones on his brothers, and then reveals himself to them, and they all come to live in Egypt. And then when Joseph dies, when Joseph dies, he asks to have his body taken into the promised land.
Okay.
But the whole kind of theme is that God was with Joseph and had a purpose and a plan for his life.
Okay. Very good. Very good. So tell me though, Elizabeth Ann, what is the significance of the many-colored coat? Because I think a lot of people have heard that story, and there is, we saw Donny Osmond doing it. And so So what's the coat all about?
The coat was a gift from his dad. My understanding is that like colorful garments were really hard to come by, and that they usually were only reserved for royalty or like really wealthy people. So to have this coat as, shepherds and herders was a big deal. And so he gave it to his youngest son, which is like, well, his second youngest.
Mhm.
Yeah, Benjamin was the youngest. So it's just like a big old insult to all the brothers. It shows that he's the favorite, and it's kind of one of the things that makes them mad.
Yeah. And what ends up happening to the coat?
Oh, so they sell him to into slavery into Egypt, and they take the coat and pour like goat's blood or sheep blood or something on it and tell their dad that he died.
Yeah. So his dad grieved for him.
Mm-hmm.
Jacob did. Yeah. Very cool. Thank you for connecting the dots there.
Sure.
And so the Israelites, so remember that God told Abraham to go to Canaan, and he went and he started raising his family there. And then because of famine, they ended up leaving Canaan and going to where? Where did they all end up? Egypt. Right, Egypt. Okay. And so that's an important part of setting up the next book of the Bible, right? To know that this is how they ended up in Egypt, because there was no food in the land of Canaan anymore. And so, but because of what had happened to Joseph, he was like second in command in Egypt. And so he was able to provide for all of his family. And so that helps take us through 1805 BC, where God's people are living in Egypt. Now, what happened so look at the patriarchs along the way, okay? So we had Adam was in the era of creation, and then we had Abraham starting the era of patriarchs. After Abraham, who was the next son? Isaac. And then who was the son of Isaac? Jacob. And then who was the son of Jacob that we hear the most about? Joseph. So do you see the family timeline going there? But what happened to Jacob's name?
Israel.
God changed Jacob's name to Israel, right? So when we talk about the 12 tribes of Israel, what we're talking about is it started with the 12 sons of Jacob, right? Of which Joseph was one of those, was the 11th son, okay? Now we'll actually see that Levi is not considered a tribe. And so Joseph's sons Ephraim and Manasseh end up being considered each equally like sons, which was a way of honoring him. And that becomes the 12 tribes of Israel. And what happened to Levi? Does anybody know? He would become the priest, and all his tribe would be those that served in the temple. Yeah, we'll talk more about him later on, right? Very cool. All right, does that timeline make sense? Anybody have any aha moments? No? We all knew it already, huh? Well, good. Then maybe it's been a good reminder of the basics of Genesis. So we didn't really get into theology or what we learn from all of those stories, because we could actually we preached through the book of Genesis, and I think it took us almost 2 years to get through it, right? And so so we're not going to treat it that way this time. But one other thing I wanted to ask about Genesis, where do you see Jesus in Genesis? Do you see Jesus in Genesis? Any ties to him? Or?
In the beginning.
He
was there in the beginning with God.
Yes, yes.
Abraham was going to kill Isaac. He was going to say a sacrifice of his son.
Yes, very good. I think those are the two best examples. Very good. So we see Jesus. We know now that Jesus was at creation and from the very beginning. So he was already there with God. And you remember when God was making man, he said, "Let us make man in our image." So Jesus was already there. And then when Abraham was preparing to sacrifice Isaac, that just seems unfathomable to us, doesn't it? That a father would sacrifice his son, especially if he waited so long to have a son, if he was promised and he was waiting for the promise to be fulfilled, then why on earth would you take the life of your son? And so what that is a foreshadowing of what's going to happen in the story of Jesus, but it helps us to relate to the pain of that sacrifice, what it means for a father to give up his son. And so we know that this story is meant to, is in part helps us to relate later on when God has to give up his son, or chooses to give up his son for us. And so Jesus is all over that one, right? Right. Any other observations about Genesis? Tell me your favorite story from Genesis. Does anybody have a favorite?
This isn't a favorite, but it's an observation. I was going to tell you the chapter, but near the end of Genesis, if you read Jacob's blessings of his sons, they are wild. Like, some are just like, you're like a donkey. Son, you're wonderful. You're going to live by the sea. Like, it is, I don't think I've ever read that chapter before. So that is like the coolest thing I've read.
Very cool. All right.
Yeah.
But each one was different, right? And it does go through and tell you his blessing on each of his sons.
Yeah, each was wildly different. I was trying to decide which one I would have wanted.
Yeah.
Which blessing.
Very good. I don't know. I think Noah's Ark has to be a favorite story. Noah's Ark is a story of redemption, isn't it? That the world was unrighteous and evil, and yet God made a way for mankind to continue. So that's a pretty phenomenal story.
It even said in there that things had people had become so evil that God was, he had regretted making man because they had gotten so bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and these are the good guys.
Yeah.
They've all done, most all of them done something just relatively horrible.
Yeah.
In our view of justice today.
I agree.
Tricking and cheating and lying and stealing and murdering. Okay, this is our ancestry.
It's not the family history you would pick, is it?
No.
No.
I like the very first chapter, because to me, it's the words that God gave to directly to Moses. There's no passing down of stories that have been passed down for years and years and years, I don't think.
Yeah.
To me, I think that something that is an amazing sequence of events of, the 6 days of creation.
Yeah. It is pretty amazing. Okay. Cool. All right. One of the things I'd like to do is pick a verse that represents our chapter or our whole book. And that's really hard to do with Genesis. But if we look at the 17th chapter, and this is part of God's conversation with Abraham. It's where he changed his name. And he says, I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for the generations to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. That's 17:7. And so that would be a great verse to commit to memory, just to represent Genesis. I think the other one would probably be what we went over before. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's a really key verse. But also now you see God making a covenant with Abraham, and that's going to change the course of history, and for all of us, because we all become a part of Abraham's family later on. So if we were to pick a song for Genesis, we would probably pick Father Abraham. Does anybody know that song? Yeah.
Susan does.
Yes. Yeah.
Father Abraham.
See, I know it. You knew it.
Now it will be in your head for the rest of the night. Yeah. So, all right. Good lesson. Okay, I think that puts us at about an hour. Who thought we could have covered Genesis in an hour? But we did it, didn't we? Yeah. Sort of. And along the way. If we talked about all the long ways, we'd still be talking. When we
Well, actually, I had it down to a page and a half
Yeah.
on legal. So
Yeah.
why did you?
There you go. There you go. Thank you everyone who contributed. I have assignments for next week too. Aren't you excited? Okay. What book will we be covering next week? Exodus, right. And part of the book of Exodus is what happened to Egypt. Do you remember? The 10 plagues. Okay. So I need 10 volunteers, and each one of you is going to look up a plague for next week. Doesn't that sound like fun?
All right. I'll be a volunteer. Give me another chance.
Okay. Stephanie, you're to look up the first plague, okay? And then you can come back and tell us what it was, okay?
Okay.
Who wants number 2?
I'll take it.
All right, Tim's got number 2. Who wants number 3? Bryce has got number 3. Y'all have to remember your numbers now because I didn't write them down. All right, who wants number 4? Nathan, you want one? No? Okay. Dola, you want number 4?
I want the last one.
Oh, Dola wants the last one. Okay, Dola, dibs on 10. Y'all were waiting for it. All right, number 4 is up for grabs. Who's going to take number 4? Nathan is good. Good. Thank you, Nathan. Nathan takes number 4. All right, who wants number 5? Ooh, I feel like I'm auctioning. Number 5. Who wants number 5? Ryan's taking number 5. Now we have 6. Who wants number 6? Dan, you want number 6?
I will, but I can't count that.
Yeah. I think Bryce and Nathan will help you. All right. You remember he has number 6. Yeah.
I
Okay.
remember the numbers.
Okay. Who wants number 7?
I can do 7. Or did
Okay.
someone already say it?
Nope. Elizabeth Ann's got 7.
What do they-
Oh, Gray's got 8. Now we got 9. Last one. Alan will take 9, and Dola's taking 10. Okay. All right. If you forget your number, you know what? We'll look it up when we're here together. So
Number 1. Number 1.
yes, you can remember it, right? I don't know what page it's on. Feel free to draw a picture if you would like to add an illustration. I think actually, Elizabeth Ann, are we going to ask the kids to do something for to illustrate maybe some of the plagues? That would be fun. So
Yeah, we'll probably have to censor which plagues.
yeah, that would probably be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. It's been a good time. Thank you guys for coming. And for those of you who are watching, we appreciate your being here as well. And so we're going to ask Alan if he would close us in prayer.
All right. Thank you, Lord God Almighty, for this time and the opportunity you afforded us to learn more, to be more, internalize that which you've laid out before us. For this is our history. We are the legacy. We thank you, Lord God Almighty, that you're with us this week, and we carry forward your lessons, your wisdom, in Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. All right. Thanks, guys. I hope to see you on Sunday.
Well, see, I done good. I think the